Before we begin our lesson, let's take a look at the answers to last week's question. As you can see, here are the two answers. The first answer simply lists out 3 different lines and 3 different print statements. Because each print statement will put a new line after each one, simply putting them in order will print them out. The alternate answer is using \n's inside your line. \n is essentially an enter character. So whenever you put it, it'll put an enter. As you can see, when we run this, you get the first option working and the second option working. Now on to today's lessons. Python has an interesting feature which many other languages do not have. This is a lack of having to define a data type. Data types are different types of information the computer can store in memory. For instance, the computer needs to know if you are storing a number or a string. Strings need more memory than a small number, so the computer needs to plan accordingly.
Python is special, however, because it decides for itself what data type you are using for a variable. We have yet to learn how to make a variable, but we can still think about this in a more abstract sense. In other languages like Java, you make a variable by giving it a name and a data type. This is the benefit of that you do not need to give it a value right away. You can create a variable and then give it its first value. That's called initializing it later on in the program. This can, however, get a little messy because you have to decide beforehand what the data type will be.
With Python, when you make a new variable, you have to give it a name and a value. Using this value, Python can determine what data type you want to use. This is called type inference. For instance, if you make a new variable and give it a string, it will note you want the variable to hold strings. That is straightforward, but there are many different data types, some of which are closer. You can see on the screen the various different data types. For now though, let's look at the difference between ints and floats. Ints are integers and hold, well, integers. Floats, on the other hand, hold all floating point numbers, which mean decimals. This is where the system can sneak up on you. If you make a variable and want to hold floats in it, but if you want to start at 0, you can't set it equal to 0 because it will think you want an integer. In order to tell it you want a float, you have to set it to 0.0.
This is where the confusion lies. You will get much more used to this when you start making variables for yourself in the next lesson.